I love the Retroid Pocket 4 Pro. The wait for this thing to pre-order was agonizing, the wait for it to ship was agonizing, and the wait for it to show up at my door was especially agonizing. So I was, of course, keeping tabs on Triggergate, hoping I wasn't affected. I had a good solid week of time with the Retroid, and was almost wrapped up with the Wind Waker playthrough. I thought maybe I was out of the woods. I woke up yesterday, February 3rd, to see a note about Retroid being off until February 18th due to Chinese New Year. I happily booted up Wind Waker, and within 15 minutes, out goes my L2. I was especially surprised given that everything I'd seen so far was limited to R2 going. It's worth noting that Retroid addressed this issue on January 30th. Trigger issues have been addressed as of that date, and it shouldn't be an issue with orders shipped past then. They're also providing a 2-year warranty to provide replacement triggers in the form of sending a full back shell with both triggers for you to swap out. This is great. I think they did a good job of addressing it. But given that I was looking at a 2-week wait until Retroid was back and likely another 2 to 3 weeks for a replacement shell to ship, I wasn't too stoked about this, so I did some digging on what it would take to do a fix on my own. Luckily, there's an Imgur post from Reddit user Plez, which helped me along quite a bit. I'll link this in the description. As well, for opening the system, there's an excellent teardown video from Kai's Retro Gaming that I used to get in the first place. I'll link this as well. He'll do a much better job of showing you how to get in than I will. Fair warning, I'm no Scorsese, so my overhead camera work isn't great, and I got a good few shots of the top of my head. I found some new gray hairs, so lessons learned. But I'm not keen on ripping this thing open again to get more footage, so hopefully what I've got will be useful. Okay, here's what you need to do this. A number 6 Torx screwdriver, a number 0 Phillips screwdriver, some pry tools, and a small pair of needle nose pliers. You might be able to get away without the pry tools and the needle nose pliers, but I'd definitely suggest them. And springs. There was some conflicting information online about what springs would work as a replacement, so I ordered a couple of kinds. I believe one style is for original DualShock 4 and DualSense controllers, and one style is a second revision of the DualShock 4 trigger. The second revision is the one that I went with. I'll leave a link in the description of what I ordered. This link is for Amazon Canada, but hopefully you can find something comparable in your country. Alright, once you've followed Kai's videos and have your backplate removed, each trigger will have a cover with 3 Phillips screws. Go ahead and remove these. Once the screws are off, this cover snap fits onto 2 pegs. These pegs are fairly robust. It takes a little bit of force to get the cover off, but if you pull it directly towards you, it should pop off with fairly little problem. Once the cover is off, the remainder of the trigger body will easily slide out of the rear shell. You'll notice that the cross-shaped piece of plastic in which the spring is mounted on has one side slightly longer than the other. If you remove the broken spring on the shorter side first, this should come off fairly easily. One note about the aforementioned Imgur post I followed. This post mentions one side of the replacement spring being longer than the other when bent. I spent quite a bit of time assessing this, and as far as I can tell, both sides are of equal length when tension is applied to the spring. This may be specific to the springs I used, but if one side is shorter, it sounds like this should be the side that's seated in the saddle on the trigger itself. When you place the spring onto the trigger, again, pay attention to the mount area with one side which is ever so slightly longer that covers the cross-shaped piece of plastic. Slide the spring onto this side first, and you shouldn't have much issue popping it on. Seat one side into what I would call the saddle of the trigger. At this point, the trigger assembly goes back into the shell and the fun begins. The idea here is to place tension on the spring by bending it shut and replacing the snap cover back on with the spring in place. This took me numerous attempts on the first trigger I replaced one on, but the method that seemed to work best for me was to use a small screwdriver to sweep the top leg of the spring down to bend it towards the leg which you inserted in the saddle. Once I had it in reach, I would grab it with my small pair of pliers and bend it downwards. If you have the pliers at the right angle, you should have room to hold this leg in place while replacing the cover on the trigger body with the snap pegs. Once it's snapped on correctly, the cover will hold the spring down until you can screw the cover on. I did both my triggers expecting that the second one will inevitably fail, and after I had this method down, it was significantly easier the second time. Once you have the 3 screws in the cover replaced, that's it. Kai's teardown video also has a reassembly portion at the end, which is worth watching, and suggests snapping the shell back together from top to bottom. If all goes according to plan, congrats. Thanks again to Kai and Plez for the resources here. It was a lifesaver for me. I'd also like to thank Athonyear on Discord for pointing me in the right direction for these resources. I'm sure I butchered the pronunciation, but that was a lot of help for me. So good luck.